Morning, everyone. It's great to see such a big group out for today's discussion about student services as part of our ongoing in the series Ask Set Anything. My name is Todd Gilchrist. I'm the Vice President of University Services and Finance here at the university. I'm also the SET sponsor and chair of the Service Excellence Steering Committee. I should say that I'm the SET co-sponsor along with Dr. Steve Dew, who we'll introduce here in just a moment. I'm going to be moderating today's session. I'd like to first begin with our treaty acknowledgement. The University of Alberta acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant communities. I'd like to start by acknowledging that this has been a challenging week for many, challenging situation that our student services staff are facing. And with this in mind, I'm thankful to everybody for being here today and would remind everybody that for those that maybe haven't been able to attend as they're focused on other priorities, that the session will be recorded for those that weren't able to attend live. As many of you are well aware, we really are in a critical period of time right now as the U of A transitions staff and services to implement the new operating model. The slide that you can see in front of you right now depicts at a high level the view of this new administrative operating model. Over time, different services will be transitioned from the decentralized part of the organization over into shared services. We'll hear more on this today, but at this point, as work continues, we don't necessarily know exactly what specific student services will be moving into shared services, but I know our panel will be able to give us some more information on that today. We do want to spend as much time as we possibly can answering your questions today, so we are going to get started. I'd like to start by introducing our panel today. We'll start with Dr. Stephen Dew, Provost and Vice President of Academic. I will just note that Steve, I understand you do have a hard stop. You have to kick off another meeting right at noon, so we will understand if you drop off just a minute or so before we conclude today. We'd like to welcome Melissa Padfield. Melissa is our Vice Provost and University Registrar and the administrative sponsor and initiative lead of the Student Services Workstream within SET. We have with us today Barbara Billingsley. Barbara is our Dean in the Faculty of Law and the academic sponsor of the Student Services Workstream. We also have with us today Raymond Matthias, Director of the Student Service Center, a face that everybody is getting to know well through these sessions, Rob Monroe, our Executive Lead of the Service Excellence Transformation Program, and Brian Stewart, our Program Director of the Service Excellence Transformation Program. So welcome to our panelists. I'm now going to turn things over to Steve to provide us with some opening remarks. Steve.
Thank you, Todd. And I also want to acknowledge the hard work that all of our staff under the broad umbrella of student services and student support are doing this week as we do a few pivots and twists to keep up with the evolving and rather alarming COVID trends. On top of our work returning to campus, the recent changes to in-person meetings in Alberta has meant this week has required a swift response from our staff, and everyone is in the middle of that. So thank you for your work, and thank you for joining us for this conversation. Please assure any of your colleagues that have not been able to join us today that the session is recorded and that they will be able to watch this session later. Grant, can we bring up the slides? Thank you. So this slide is intended to give just a bit of a sense of some of the pieces and the timeline under the Student Services work stream. As you're likely aware, SET has a number of work streams focusing on different aspects of the university's work. will of course be focused on the student services work stream, and like to go into a little bit of the detail of some of the progress that has been achieved so far. So we've got three timelines that you'll see A, B, or well, three sections, A, B, and C, that you'll see on the left side, and the approximate timeline laying out below us. So if we look at the top one, A, visioning, this is the work that's underway to design the future of the student services system at the University of Alberta. While all the pieces don't necessarily have to organizationally come together, they certainly do have to fit and work together to provide a comprehensive and student-friendly system. So I'll elaborate a little bit further on this work in a few minutes. The B slice is the Student Services Center, which was officially launched on August the 12th and is already meeting student needs and responding to inquiries and requests as we speak. The director of the SSC, Raymond Matthias, is on our panel and able to answer questions about the center. The slice C is initial improvements. These are some of the early wins, many of which have been implemented and are already delivering value to students right now. And Melissa Padfield will be able to speak further on this shortly. So can we go to the next slide, please? So I want to go through some of the changes that have and achievements that have been made as we've had the student services stream progress. So we have achieved a number of key objectives. So just listing them here. I mentioned already the launch of the Student Services Center on August 16th. The centralization of the administration of student awards to the Office of the Registrar Student Financial Services Office, which has created a streamlined process that increases transparency and accountability. The creation of a student recruitment center of expertise that includes recruitment service partners and a team of recruiters that work within each college to provide support to each of our faculties. The creation of an enrollment management center of expertise, including the implementation of enrollment management service partners embedded within each college to work closely with all of the faculties to develop short and long-term strategic enrollment plans. And the start of a process to automate and centralize parts of the student transfer admissions process. In addition to this work, we've been working on a future vision for student services, which I want to talk about in a little bit more detail. So the visioning work, that work involves really bringing together student services leaders to develop a plan for the future of student services that will prepare the University of Alberta for enrollment growth in the coming 2 to 5 years. And that's really focusing on making our processes efficient and scalable so that we can handle increased volume. Many of you will have heard me or the president talk about 50,000 students at the University of Alberta by 2025. And that growth is going to be driven by demographic opportunities as well as online learning trends and other factors. So this represents significant growth for the university, and we have to be in a position to support both the new learners and the new kinds of learners that this growth will bring. We also need to continue to improve and evolve the student experience so that we can retain and support the excellent students that we admit. Our students' needs and their expectations are evolving, and we want to be at the leading edge of being able to meet those. So this vision is not necessarily about centralization for cost cutting. It is really about preparing for growth and delivering an outstanding student experience. I want to be clear, there is no intent to cut or halt services. Rather, it is about really being able to service all the students through simple access points, such as the Student Service Center, and to be able to maintain our expertise in different student experiences without bouncing the students around from one department to another to access the different pieces that they need to experience. And also about taking the burden of navigating all of the services at the U of A off of the student through the student support, through the Student Service Center, and through improved web presence and technology supports. This can be achieved through centralization in some cases and through other methods such as process improvements in others. So the student services stream is working to define what change is required to achieve all of those intents. So okay, thank you. We're moving then on to some areas that have come up as questions that have emerged as we've gone through the work, and it really is about the scope of the visioning. So let's start with central units. The scope of the work that SET is undertaking is focused primarily on the services that are provided by central units, such as the Dean of Students Office, the Office of the Registrar, U of A International, and the Faculty of Grad Studies and Research. So the visioning work that we're doing will recommend changes in structures within these units to meet the overall vision that I've just described, primarily by increasing efficiency of high volume services so that these services can scale and respond to that enrollment growth. Improving student access and experience of what I hope are going to be high quality student supports so that we can continue to improve, evolve, and expand that student experience. And setting up other portfolios for growth so that these other units across campus, for example, those that are helping drive the recruitment, have the expertise that they need to achieve the university's ambition to grow. So details of this vision are still being developed. This is a work in progress, but we expect to have more information to share on the specifics of these changes in the coming months. So those are the central units. Let's talk about the faculties and the colleges. So in addition to this work, there are conversations taking place in each of the colleges and the faculties about the development of an Office of Education within the colleges that will or may impact the ways in which student academic services are administered from from a faculty or college perspective. So work at the faculty and college level may intersect what's happening in SET, but most of that is out of the scope of what the specific SET student services work stream is about. So of course, our central units will have to collaborate closely with colleges and faculties, meaning that when those decisions are made about the structures in the academic units and what may move to the college level or what may stay at the faculty level, that those decisions are integrated and clearly communicated according to the model that's developed in order to have that improved student experience. So I'll hand now over to Melissa. Melissa's, as you heard, being one of the major leads in driving this and is the sponsor of the work stream, and will have a little bit more detail in order to be able to share with us. So Melissa, over to you.
Thanks so much, Steve. So we can change to the next slide. So Steve just outlined about the visioning, and it's my distinct pleasure to talk a little bit more about items B and C on the student service stream timeline. So the Student Service Center, we were really enthusiastic to be able to launch with our 35 new staff, some of whom transitioned over from the previous Student Connect that many of you would have been familiar with. And we brought in a whole swath of folks from across campus to build this new team. We were also really excited at the same time to expand the services that were able to be represented by our chatbot Vera, to improve our web interface so that students can find us on multiple channels more easily, and also to update our branding to really be in line with the new vision for the university, as well as for our moving into a new phase of the Student Service Center. So this also enabled us to enhance things like our queuing technology, to again, focus on making student travel through this work even more seamless. So let's move to the next slide so I can talk a little bit more about what it's like to move through the Student Service Center. Our goal with the Student Service Center has always been to create a universal front door, really to allow students ease of navigation through what can be a very complex set of services that we all know at the university and that students need to access. The goal here has been to create an experience where students know where they can go, or if they don't know, they have a place, the Student Service Center, to come. Services are triaged through the Student Service Center to advisors in the hopes of being able to resolve things as easily as possible and to help students triage through this system. We can access this through a number of channels. Students can access us through email, through chat, through phone, and through in-person services. This allows for us to meet students where they are when they need us. We can transition to thinking about the Student Service Center really as an ecosystem of warm referral. Our goal is to be able to resolve things in person, but also if we need to connect with other offices, we'll do that as seamlessly as we possibly can. This schematic really does help to outline the way in which that ecosystem will work going forward. The stream has also had a couple of other endeavors underway, and so we can transition to the next slide to talk about those. So the awards processes that Steve alluded to before, we've centralized continuing student financial support awards. This has allowed us to increase transparency and accountability to students, but also to ensure a predictable timeline. So students find out about their financial supports at a time before they need to be making decisions around debt financing and loans. This has been a really critical way for us to meet students where they are and the needs that they have. As Steve mentioned, we've also created 2 centers of expertise within the Office of the Registrar to support overall enrollment management. One has been through the creation of a student recruitment center of expertise that focuses on domestic undergraduate recruitment with a strong connection to UAI and offshore international recruitment. We've also created an enrollment management center of expertise that allows us to better coordinate enrollment management at the undergraduate level through the creation of enrollment management service partners. And finally, we've looked at implementation of better automation and centralization around student transfers. And this work is ongoing, and we're super grateful to the input that has come from our faculty partners across campus that's allowing us to help make sure that students who wish to transfer internally and from outside the institution can do so in a much more streamlined fashion. So these are some of the other areas that we've been focusing on in the student services stream, and really trying to ensure, once again, that we're able to create a more effective, agile, and responsive ecosystem for our students. Back to you, Todd.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Steve, for those opening comments. I know that our group here today is likely interested to get into the questions, so let's get moving with that. I'm pleased to welcome a member of the team in the Student Service Center, Michael Watmode, asked today's first question. So Michael, over to you, please.
Okay, so the first question for today, it's about the future of student services. So what other services can we expect to see folded into the Student Service Center in the future?
Yeah, great, thank you, Michael. Melissa, I think I'm going to turn that one over to you, please, for a response.
For sure. Thanks for the question, Michael. So obviously that's the question on everybody's mind. What else is going into the Student Service Center? And right now, the Student Service Center is focused on triage, right? Making sure that we can be that universal front door for students to help get them where they need to go. In many cases, we're going to be able to offer service provision on things associated with the Office of the Registrar functions and the Dean of Student functions. And beyond that, we're trying to make the experience of moving through our student service ecosystem a little bit easier. Beyond that, though, our eventual goal is to have 80% of inquiries that come through the Student Service Center resolved in the center, and then triage the more complex ones, the 20% we're hoping, out into the rest of our ecosystem. To do that, we're going to take a look at what kinds of large volume, more transactional processes can be folded into the Student Service Center, and the way in which we can do those things in a more efficient way. So those are the things you should be looking at the first pass of what we'd like to be able to fold in to make sure, again, that we can resolve those things that are associated with what I'll call the business of being a student a little bit more seamless for students, and resolve 80% of those inquiries within the Student Service Center. So while I can't give you the list right now, the things to focus on, again, are those high volume tasks that we need to help students with, that can be repeatable, and that we're able to serve all students with. So if it's something that a student comes to us because they're a student, we want to be able to help them in the SSC. And if it's something that's more complex or specific to program, we want to make sure we connect them with those supports in an easy way.
Thanks for that answer, Melissa, and thank you very much, Michael, for getting our question period started today. Greatly appreciate that. It's always good to get that first one asked and answered. I'd now like to open things up to the group. And we'll use our virtual hands. I'm pretty sure 19 months into this, we all know where that is, but if not, it should be under the reactions across the bottom of your screen. We're going to answer as many of your questions as possible today during the rest of our time together. However, if you're not able to ask your question live, or you may not feel comfortable in asking your question live, we have also added a question form to the chat, or will be in just a moment here, and we'll get to these questions if we run out of hands. So the link should be there. We will get at it here. Tanya, we will start with you, please.
Hi, good morning. I wanted to come back to something Melissa said, which was, I really liked this phrase, the universal front door. And I'm wondering how or when we can expect graduate students to be served by the Student Service Center. I think at this point they've been largely underserved by the process. And I think that if the Student Service Center is supposed to be for all students as a universal front door, I'd like a better sense of when graduate students can expect to receive the same kind of services that undergraduate students are receiving.
But Melissa, would you like to start with that one? And then Steve, I'm not sure if you might have something to add as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's up to Steve whether he wants to jump in first or wants me to go first. I see Steve.
Let me start, and that'll give Melissa the chance to figure out all the right details to answer. So first off, our number one commitment is to make sure that all students, graduate students, undergraduate, are getting the services they need. And I realize that the way that our service system has evolved historically, it's a bit of a patchwork. The pieces are all there, but it might not be easy to find them and be able to rotate them and fit them together in the way that they ought to. So we do want to make sure that we are, if it involves a transition, that we are transitioning all of the pieces that are, I think the terminology that Melissa used, if you're looking for a service because you're a student, that you find it particularly through the front door, the universal front door of the Student Services Center. But if what you need is program specific or highly related to the faculty, a unique service provided by the faculty, including the Faculty of Grad Studies, that you get routed there. So the services, whether it's financial aid or mental health supports, regardless of whether you're a graduate student or an undergraduate, go right now. I mean, we're trying to have all the pieces served out of there. Some of the more specialized pieces, we're still kind of doing the evaluation, where does this fit? And some of those might be a little bit more downstream. But the intent is that this visioning process really comes to a fairly solid place within the next few months. And from that point, either we've got a clear transition plan or it's already in the works, and we can give you a date at which it should be up and running. So Melissa, hopefully I didn't contradict any of the exact answers that you're going to provide. So over to you.
No, actually, that was a perfect context setting, Steve, and a lot of what I was going to say as well. So right now, there's a lot of services that graduate students can access through the Student Service Center. So those things that are associated with the virtue of just being a student. So whether it's your record management, that's basic record management, you need transcripts, you need triaging into different mental health services or other services that might be offered around campus, you can find that information already. The other thing we're working on with the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research is to make sure that we have a series of what we're calling knowledge base articles. And knowledge base articles really are the backbone of the student service ecosystem, and something that we're looking to build out more robustly over time, because it allows service providers to all access the same consistent information, regardless of where a student tries to access that information. And so our group of specialists that were something new we created within the SSC are accountable for bringing together that information. And so some of that information needs to come from grad studies and allow us to be able to answer appropriate level of question in the SSC. And so that work's evolving over the next few months. And then will be built on further as the visioning work continues to streamline. Because I agree with you, Tanya, and I think everyone agrees that we really want to make this as easy and most student-centered as possible. So when you need program information, you go to where the program information lives. But when you just need help as a student, you can come to the SSC and we can serve you regardless of what kind of student you are.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Melissa. And thank you, Tanya, for the question. Jillian, nice to see you this morning. Over to you.
Yeah, always good to see you, Todd. So my understanding is that the service excellence process with all of this was to look at kind of our ecosystem, as it's been called, as a whole, and then see what makes sense in order to create these types of efficiencies. So in thinking of it as the whole, when I look at that kind of first slide you show that has like the visual diagram of that service excellence, the centers and everything, I don't see the colleges and the faculties in that operating model. And you did mention that there's still quite a bit of uncertainty in this area, but I'm wondering what the timeline is for giving your student services employees certainty. I talk with a lot of folks on campus, and continuing in this kind of limbo when we're supposedly looking at everything as a whole, it's not kind and it's not respectful to folks. So any comments on the timeline on when we can give folks some form of certainty in one form or another?
Thank you, Jillian. Steve, recognizing that Jillian's question includes colleges and so forth, would you like to start with some comments on that?
Sure. So the colleges certainly add an element of complexity to being able to completely architect and articulate what the whole system looks like. The colleges have just been launched a couple of months ago, and this represents a fairly significantly new way for us to think about the academy and how elements of the academic services, if I can refer to them that way, are going to be delivered. There's no question that a lot of the particularly program-specific, or as I say, academic-specific activities will not be in the Student Services Center. They will be located in the academic realm, either in the colleges or the faculties. So if you're on the question of, is this I'll call it a generic student service versus an academic student service, if you know which side of that you're on, and it's on the former, then I think we can give a fair amount of clarity fairly quickly. If you're on the academic side of that, so advising aspects related to, let's say, work integrated learning or clinical placements, those are the pieces that are clearly in the academic sector. And the work of the colleges right now is really intensive, with the college deans working with their respective councils of deans and the faculties themselves to really figure out what parts of those academic services make the most sense to be delivered at the college level to provide economies of scale, consistency of service, opportunity to have a more coordinated approach to dealing with our partners, particularly on the work integrated learning and the placements, clinical placement sides. Those are likely going to be disciplines, another area where likely there are some really good reasons to be bringing those together at the college level. So if you're in the space of those activities, we're going to have a little bit of patience as the academy kind of works through how do these pieces fit in a model that is really quite new, not just to the University of Alberta, but to the broader context of Canadian post-secondary systems. I am expecting that we will have most of that visioning done by Christmas, but that does not necessarily mean that the services themselves will immediately start transitioning. Some functions, particularly in the student services world, live on an academic cycle. And you know, for example, you certainly don't want to disrupt our recruitment and admissions process at key parts of the year, because to do so would cause mayhem for the whole system. So I guess to come back to the timelines, if it's a college-related issue, you should have a fairly good idea of where the pieces are going to land by Christmas. If it's I'll call it more generic student services, I'm hoping that Rob and Melissa might be able to give us more precise numbers, or dates, but those are a little bit closer to understanding a little more clearly.
Thank you, Steve. Rob, Melissa, anything you would add?
Sorry, I was just trying to find my unmute around the non-academic pieces of student services. So at the moment, we've made the vast majority of the changes that we're going to make on the non-academic side, right? The Student Service Center in its first iteration is completely staffed. There are no new positions planned for the Student Service Center at this point in time. We've also fully staffed our Recruitment Center of Expertise and our Enrollment Management Center of Expertise. So both of those staffing decisions are completed. And so folks have migrated from across the university, and I'm really pleased to see the kind of talent that was interested in participating in those non-academic service supports as well. Beyond that, of course, the results of our visioning work will potentially result in other kinds of transitions, and we're excited to explore what those may mean. And that should be concluded in several weeks' time. So none of this is very, very long term in terms of coming to decisions and conclusions for what will be this version of the new normal. And as we continue to evaluate and reflect on what students need to be successful, we'll continue to look at whether or not anything else needs to be adjusted. But for the most part, our hiring is complete with those changes that we outlined through the presentation.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Jillian, for the question. People have heard me say this before. I do understand, people's uncertainty, and we are all working as diligently as we possibly can and as quickly as we can to answer those questions. So I do just want to acknowledge that. I would also just note, while I don't have the details right at my fingertips, I understand that there will be town halls sort of divided up by college just in the first part of October, and so there may be some further details. I'm certain there will be some further details that can be provided on this topic there. So thank you very much. Sandra, over to you, please.
Good morning. Thank you for hosting this. So I work with the Faculty of Nursing, and we've already noticed an increase in times for responses to students from the Student Services Center. So we're wondering as a group what the university's plan is to avoid further increase in wait times, and what measures will be put into place to ensure efficiency and that form and letter requests are done in a timely manner. And if students are to follow up with the Student Services Center, how can they do so without going back into the queue? And what can the faculty do on the students' behalf? Because if the students are waiting too long, then they'll definitely come back to the faculty. And so how do we advocate for them in this case if they're somewhere in the queue? And then also, what is going to be the standard for response times coming from the registrars, or pardon me, the Student Services Center?
Thank you, Sandra. There were a few points and questions there. So Melissa, Raymond, who would like to start?
I think it might be helpful, Todd, for Raymond to outline how we approach what volume intake and management, and then I'm happy to comment sort of on what our future forward and this sort of transition period really means.
Fantastic. Raymond, over to you, sir.
Oh, for sure. Well, first, I just really want to acknowledge that we've been working through a pretty unique time. And so in addition to the pandemic response that we're all facing, the Student Service Center had an extraordinary amount of volume at the end of the summer. Students generally having questions not only about the pandemic response, but also about their academic programs. The staff responding to those questions, though, as Melissa just outlined, we recently hired, I feel like it's an unprecedented number of staff. We're onboarding about 20 new staff who are going through an incredible training regimen. And through that time, Melissa mentioned the continuing staff members from Student Connect. That group has been shouldering an incredible workload. Our tickets have spiked up to more than 400 coming in every day at some points. It's been hard. It really has been hard. And so I don't think that this last period is really indicative of what our service standards are going to look like at all. I was very excited. I had in my mind the ad drop deadline as a significant milestone, not only because that's a time when traditionally our volume has dropped, but it's also we're coming into the end or nearing the end of the initial training cycle for the new advising staff. And so this kind of magic thing that's happening, I feel like in a few weeks, we're going to wish that we had all that capacity last month. But it's really an exciting time. And as Melissa mentioned, we've brought staff from across campus. And so I feel like we're going to be able to return to our standard of 2 or 3 days at best, responding to students' needs. So I'm sorry that you've been feeling like our service times have been lagging, but that is how the challenge that's been facing the campus has materialized in our office. But every day I'm watching the ticket queue and happily watching it going down, and our staff morale going up, I hope. Melissa, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you pretty much covered it all, Raymond. The only thing I would say is that one of the pieces that we're very focused on in improving is technology-enabled student service provision. And so one of the things that will help with volume and turnaround times over the coming months is the enhancement of our chatbot Vera, and continuing to teach Vera more and more about what that chatbot needs to know in order to answer more student questions. And I think that's a really important part of the student service ecosystem, because it does allow students to ask a question at any time of day or night and receive an answer. And so we're working to continue to refine that, improve our ticketing system. Right now, there is an enterprise service management process underway to look at a new tool that can really help with the ticketing and making sure that we get answers and tracking of answers and triage of student inquiries done as efficiently as possible. So wrapped around the good training and the robust staff that you're going to see at the Student Service Center will also be technology supports that continue to improve those turnaround times and the ability of students to access information when they need it. So over time, this improves. It is, as Todd likes to say, a bumpy road through a pit of this transition, and that's where we are right now. And so we really do appreciate both the question and the patience, and I appreciate all the things that you're doing in the faculty to help support students at finding their way to us. And we're continuing to see improvements every single day as the SSC gets up and running.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Raymond. I would just emphasize as well, I know that Raymond has been grateful to have been able to welcome so many of our talented people from across the organization into the Student Service Center. And so again, another example of maintaining our valuable in-house talent. Thank you both. Shampreet, over to you.
Just start by saying thanking for the presentation and hosting this session to ask questions directly. My question is more about the international student services on, what are the services that SET has identified or plan, or even in a really high level overview would be better served by Student Service Center instead of ISS? And again, why do we think it's a good idea to get those services in the Student Services Center? Because as an international student myself and ISA president, I'm pretty confident that ISS do an amazing job. An international student already have a kind of a single stop already to go whenever they need assistance for any international student related matter. So I'm curious to know on why we would want to change something that is working great and is already fulfilling the need of a single stop for international students. Because my main fear over here is that international students will just end up with a diluted services under a huge umbrella, even after paying 4 times the fee.
Thank you, Shampreet. Steve, did you want to start maybe with that?
Sure, I'll get started. There might be others who have got some other things to add. So first off, Shampreet, appreciate the question, and certainly want to start by acknowledging that international students bring particular complexity to our university and some unique issues that they have to wrestle through. And so we do want to make sure that however we land, that we have to recognize the context of whatever student is in front of us. And I'm not being specific to the Student Service Center. I'm talking about the entire ecosystem, regardless of the service that you're looking to access. The context of the student is critical to whoever is the provider. Very pleased to hear your praise for the University of Alberta international team, who are currently are very much our front line on the international student service provision stage. I agree we have a really outstanding group there. Excuse me, and need, when in whatever configuration we ultimately end up with, to make sure that that standard doesn't slip, that excellence is retained, and those excellent people are continuing to be involved in building that critical relationship with our international students. Having said that, we do want to make sure that when we provide a service and recognize the context of the student for accessing that student, that the the standard and the outcome of that service it is consistent. That if it's let's say a request for mental health services, that there isn't a longer queue for an international student because of the door they went in to access those than a domestic student. And so that is part of what we're trying to work through, is to make sure that at the end of the day, the service that the student gets is meeting the bar that we're setting for ourselves, and hopefully are able to consistently raise and elevate and respond. But we don't want to have different classes of students when it comes to the quality of the service that they're provided. So that's more of an aspiration statement than a particular response to exactly how this will work, in large part because we're still in the process of figuring out how those pieces do need to come together. Had a great discussion this morning with our director and vice provost of UAI, and really this was very much the topic about what is the best mechanism within a reimagined student services environment to make sure our international students get what they need.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Shampreet. All right, we have 5 folks in the queue. I'm just going to start counting down some times here. We've got about 12 minutes or so left before we want to try to wrap up. So we'll ask people to try to remain crisp if we can, try to get through everybody's questions. Denise, please, over to you.
Ready? Kind of jumping a little bit to the side here, but my limited understanding of what's been happening in a sense with layoffs and kind of where we're at with that. If I'm understanding, there's been shuffling at the colleges with regards to staffing and things moving into the Student Service Center. So as I said, we've had new staffing in the Student Service Center that have come from faculties, departments, campus-wide. Where are we at with what layoffs and whatnot? Me personally, I don't have a good, accurate, complete listing of my contacts everywhere, just because I don't know who's gone and who's here. And I don't want to lose sight of some of the knowledge, obviously, that's left either as a whole or moved to a different department. So I would like to know kind of where we're at with regards to budget and shuffling for 21, 22, again, this time frame. And I do have a comment, sorry, about the OTRS and ticketing and Student Services Center, the ticketing system and the timing. I've been a part of answering student questions for years, and I think we're managing it very well. And I understand time delays. Everybody likes the instant answer, and I do like Vera and the live chats. I've helped with that. And questions can be anything out of left field and or really direct, long, everything. And I know within the RO have all assisted in different ways to help with this new rolling over and everything with Student Service Center. And I'm more than happy to be the phone a friend for anybody on campus. So if you have questions about students and anything that we can help with in the RO, it's reach out to people, I think is the biggest thing. We're all in it together and we're trying to help each other out and help the student first. So just throwing that out there for anybody, if you want to help a student, phone a friend. But anyway, back to the budgeting. Where are we at?
Yeah, so Denise, I will take a shot at that one, and forgive me, I don't have the sort of the exact numbers in front of me. What I can say is that the restructuring component as it goes towards the budget cuts was kind of a three-phase initiative. There was pre-set, there was set phase 1 and set phase 2. To the end of set phase 1, we had, I'll say, recognized the savings that we had needed, which leaves us roughly a third of the way through. The goal is still that, to the greatest degree possible, that the restructuring is done by the end of March 2022. Now, saying that, I think we have always acknowledged that, particularly with the movement of services to predominantly the shared services function, that some of that does, I'll say, trickle in right through fiscal 23. But I'll generally say that we are on target for sort of that March, end of March timeframe, and we're about a third of the way through. Thank you.
A third of the way to the go, 2/3 of the way through.
Sorry, yes, third of the way, 2/3 of the way through. Thank you, Steve. got my numbers mixed up there. Thank you. Thanks, Denise.
Sorry,
Sarah.
if I could just clarify meaning, sorry. So if we're looking at roughly a third, so we need a third left of disruptions by March.
Yes,
Still coming.
Yes, but I would say that if you take a look at the ways in which people have left the university in the past couple of years, disruptions is actually the smallest percentage of the total, and resignations and retirements also get counted in there.
Yeah, and movement and not being refilled and all of those categories that kind of
Correct.
shuffle underneath. Okay,
Yeah.
But we're looking at March as kind of we'll get to there. Okay, thank you.
Largely. Yeah, thanks, Denise. Sarah, please. There you are.
Oh, thank you. I'm just wondering, one of the concerns with the Student Service Center, is making sure that if Augustana or Campus Saint-Jean students contact the service center, that they're getting the correct information for those locations. Augustana has different deadlines for a number of things because our schedule is slightly different. We start earlier, we go later. And so our students are constantly, especially this week, being told an incorrect add drop deadline. And so we want to make sure that if a student does contact the service center, that they're being told what their specific campus or college, whichever it is, what their contact people are, what their deadlines are, what processes are specific to that location, because it's not the same.
Raymond, do you want to take that one?
Definitely. And Sarah, thank you for your question. And establishing new communication lines between the service center and units like Augustana are definitely top of mind. We're working actively with Alexis. We have a new chat line between our advising team and the advising team in Camrose. So, like we're always trying to do better. And thank you for the feedback. But even going back to Denise's comment there about establishing those connection points between people, so that we can have that robust feedback chain going. Our specialists can update our KBAs, and so that the new advisors and everybody on the team has the correct information. So that was previously a line of communication that did not exist, and so I'm happy that we have opened that up, and that's an area that we definitely have to continue to improve in.
Thank you, Raymond. Got about 6 minutes left here, so before we want to wrap up, Michael, over to you, please.
Okay, I'll try to keep this nice and short. So between COVID and the public health emergency, the bad faith labor negotiation complaints right now with NASA, and honestly, the obscure and lengthy restructuring process, many frontline staff right now are at a critically low morale and are experiencing burnout. How do you plan to regain the trust and confidence of frontline staff as we go through this process? Yeah,
thanks for that question, Michael. I will provide you a perspective, and and then maybe ask Steve or others to chime in. Certainly recognize that in any organization, change of this magnitude, particularly at the pace with which this change has needed to happen, are a real challenge. And any organization would be faced with the same negative aspects of that. We have worked very hard to communicate, to be transparent, to consult. Some people on the phone have heard me, or on the call have heard me, use the analogy of how you see some transitions take place in other industries or other organizations where it's a bit of a black box. Half a dozen people get together in a room and make a bunch of decisions and come out, and 1,000 people are gone sort of by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That is not how we have managed this, which hopefully has provided a level of transparency, and to the degree that we have the information, openness to our community. The flip side of that coin is that it is a protracted period of time of uncertainty as we work to try to answer those questions. So, I would suggest that either of those approaches have maybe their positives, and both would maybe have their negatives. I would welcome further input or communication on what others might think about how do we move past this point in our evolution, but I would suggest that we need to move through this period. We need to finish our transition, and we need to continue to engage our staff, and we need to continue to build the strong culture that the U of A has historically been known for. Steve, is there anything that you would add to that?
I'll certainly acknowledge that morale is a challenge right now. We've been through an awful lot, and the uncertainty, the succession of issues that have landed on the university, the complexity and the challenge of what we're trying to do, all of these are contributing to a difficult environment for everyone. And I'll just acknowledge that we do have a task to undertake once we're through this, to do that, specifically working on rebuilding trust, rebuilding morale, rebuilding a sense of esprit. I will say that I think that we're about to turn a corner from how do we cut and diminish and restructure to how do we grow, how do we become more vibrant, and we'll probably get whiplash at how quickly that transition occurs. But I do think that starts a conversation that is much more positive, much more optimistic and inspiring. So I'm hoping that's part of our solution.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the good question, Michael. Tanya, with your agreement, since you've already had a chance to ask one, just in the interest of time, I'm going to go to Kenton, and then we'll come back to you if you don't mind. Kenton, over to you, please.
Thank you. I have a complicated question. I just want to circle back to Sandra's, and Raymond, maybe you can answer this the best, but what happens when someone comes in with a more complex issue or concern? Are they given a caseworker? Like, is there a customer or content management system in the background? Do they have to rejoin the queue every time? Is there a relationship built for that person? That's a question that was on my mind. Sandra asked, but it didn't get answered, and I just want to kind of see what the workings are in the SSC.
Thank you, Kenton. Raymond?
Kenton, great question. And we definitely do have instances where a case will be escalated to a team lead who might have it on their radar to follow up with a specific student or make sure that something is handled carefully. But even when you mentioned caseworker, my mind actually went to something that would be a referral to the Dean of Students office for the social work team and those kinds of things. And so that's exactly the kind of mechanisms that we're talking about to make sure that students are treated respectfully, and when a special case that needs special attention appears, we have mechanisms for doing that. as somebody who's been around campus, even going back to Shanpreet's question, I started in international student services. I've worked in a faculty, I've worked centrally, and so I get how sometimes these cases, those are exactly the cases that we're talking about, where a student is having a difficult situation personally, but in order to resolve it, there's all these complex things that have to happen. So that's exactly what we need to get better at. But I don't mean to speak around your question, but I think it really does cut to the heart of what we need to get better at. But absolutely, whether it's a referral to a specialist unit or a team lead or a specialist that can take care of the student case, absolutely, that's top of mind.
Thank you. And just, I guess, leading into that, and this will probably, I'll put it in the document, but I'm hoping there will be an answer. Can there just be a little bit more transparency in terms of the training that's involved, especially like faculty specific in terms of, like we just heard again with Augustana and Campus St. Jean, there's obviously some nuances, right, that people might not be aware of. So are there reaching out to other faculties and other programs, professional programs, for example, that might be able to provide some guidance in there or point out some things that might be missed?
Well, for sure. And Melissa mentioned earlier what we call our KBAs. And so the documents that serve as the basis for our advisor training, those are developed in collaboration with those units. And so absolutely wanting to make sure that that information is correct and updated on a regular basis and done in consultation with the relevant unit. So we would never want to be advising. And again, having been on the other side of that, wanted to make sure that students are getting the right information, because you know, misinformation is always problematic, but it's the death of things on campus when students appear to the correct stakeholder saying, well, hey, over there they told me that this is the way this is going to go, you know, what gives? So everybody loses credibility and the students' frustration levels go through the roof. So yeah, I see this as the meat of the challenge that we need to face.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Kenton. Thank you, Raymond. Tanya, Sandra, I'm sorry, but we're going to run out of time. So what I'm going to offer, if you would be so kind, is there is the Q&A form that was posted in the chat. If you wouldn't mind putting your question in there, we will make sure that that gets answered. And I'll also, just to make sure that we don't lose track of that, I'll ask Megan McDougall to reach out to both of you directly and just make sure that we've captured that. Apologies, but do just want to respect folks' time. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today, you know, sharing your honest feedback, your thoughtful questions and input. I think that is one of the strengths of the Ask Set Anything series that we've put together. As I was just mentioning, you know, if you have questions that weren't answered here today, if you think of questions after we're off the call here, please do submit them through the SET feedback form. You can find that at the UAT website as well after the call today. For those of you that registered for today's event, you will receive an email in just the next few days with the slides and the recording from the session, as well as a post-event survey. Please do take a minute. I know we get surveyed to death, it seems, these days every time you turn around, but we do take that feedback seriously and work to make these events and similar events better and more meaningful for those that attend. For those of you that have tuned in, I should say, to the live stream with us today, the slides and recording will also be added to the UAT website, and you'll be able to find that under the consultation tab on that website. I would like to thank a few of the people that worked to make today possible. First of all, big thanks to our panelists, Steve, Melissa, Barbara, Raymond, Rob, and Brian, even though we didn't get the opportunity to hear from all of you. Thank you to Claire and Grant. You have become instrumental in helping us on the technical side for these events, so thank you very much. And a huge shout out to Pam and Jason for being here as our ASL interpreters today. Thanks as well to the SET team who do work hard in the background and have been preparing for today's event for the past number of weeks. Please do watch our FAQ page on the University of Alberta for Tomorrow website. as well as the student services stream webpage specifically. We will be posting answers to questions that were submitted before today's session that we didn't get to, and any others that come in today, as well as the questions that were asked during our session today. You'll be able to see a transcript of those questions. Our next event, as said, anything will be focused on procurement, and that is currently scheduled for October 4th from 9 to 10. So if that's an area that you're interested in, would like some more information, please do join us for that. We'll continue to share updates in the quad every Thursday for the broader community, as well as my regular biweekly communication that comes out that I know filters down through much of the organization. So thank you again, everybody, for coming. Greatly appreciate your time, and have a great and safe weekend.